This episode doesn't just move the story forward, it quietly flips the entire power structure of Landman on its head. By the time episode 6 ends, it becomes painfully clear that nothing is stable anymore. Not Tommy's position, not Cammy's trust, and definitely not the future of MTEX. What makes this episode so powerful is that it doesn't rely on explosions or loud moments. Instead, it works through pressure, manipulation, and choices that feel small in the moment but will destroy relationships in the long run. Episode 6 is way better than anyone expected because it finally shows us the cost of every decision made so far. Episode 6 opens with the consequences of Cammy's choice hanging over everyone like a storm cloud that refuses to move. The deal with Galliano is officially in motion, and while Cammy believes she has secured the company's survival, the reality is far more unsettling. From the very beginning, Tommy can feel it. His influence is slipping, and he is no longer the voice Cammy listens to first. What hurts the most is not just being ignored, but watching Galliano slowly replace him. Not through open confrontation, but through calm confidence and perfectly timed reassurance. Galliano doesn't rush. He doesn't threaten. He simply positions himself as the man with answers, while Tommy is framed as the man stuck in fear. Tommy, on the other hand, spends most of this episode trying to hold on to control in a world that no longer wants his caution. He keeps doing what he has always done, thinking 3 steps ahead, warning about consequences, and trying to protect Cammy from decisions that could destroy her legally and morally. But the problem is that fear sounds weak when someone else is offering certainty. Every time Tommy raises a red flag, Galliano calmly dismisses it. Every time Tommy talks about risk, Galliano talks about opportunity. And slowly, Cammy starts to see Tommy not as a protector, but as an obstacle. One of the most painful aspects of this episode is watching Tommy realize that his loyalty no longer buys him trust. He isn't fired. He isn't openly challenged. He is simply sidelined. Meetings continue without his input. Decisions are made before he even enters the room. And the more he tries to explain himself, the more defensive he appears. This is where episode 6 becomes quietly brutal. Tommy isn't losing his job because he's wrong. He's losing it because the room has changed and he hasn't. Meanwhile, Galliano plays his role perfectly. He never attacks Tommy directly. Instead, he reframes every warning Tommy gives as insecurity. He makes Cammy feel powerful, independent, and finally free from being managed. He reinforces the idea that she doesn't need someone holding her back. She needs someone pushing her forward. And Cammy, still emotionally raw from her husband's death and desperate to prove herself, leans into that idea fully. To her, trusting Galliano feels like growth. Trusting Tommy feels like staying stuck. What makes this section of the episode so effective is how realistic it feels. There is no villain speech, no dramatic betrayal, just a slow shift in loyalty that happens so naturally that by the time Tommy notices it, it's already too late. Episode 6 doesn't ask us to pick sides immediately. Instead, it lets us sit with the discomfort of knowing that everyone thinks they are doing the right thing. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. By the end of this first act, the question is no longer whether Galliano is manipulating the situation. The real question is whether Tommy can survive in a system that no longer values caution, patience, or experience. And judging by how confidently Galliano now stands beside Cammy, the answer doesn't look good at all. While the power shift at MTEX continues quietly in the background, episode 6 turns its attention to Cooper, and this is where the episode becomes unexpectedly emotional. What starts as confidence slowly turns into pressure, and by the end of this section, Cooper is clearly realizing that adulthood is arriving much faster than he is prepared for. The episode makes it very clear that Cooper isn't just playing at being grown anymore. Every choice he makes now carries real weight, and for the first time, he actually feels it. Cooper enters this episode believing he has finally stabilized his life. He has a job under his father, his financial disaster has been temporarily fixed, and his relationship with Ariana feels exciting and intense. But Landman does something smart here. Instead of rewarding him for surviving his mistakes, the show forces him to face responsibility head-on. The excitement starts fading the moment reality steps in. His job is no longer symbolic. He has expectations, schedules, and consequences. And unlike before, there is no one shielding him completely. The relationship with Ariana is where this pressure truly multiplies. Their decision to move forward with marriage stops feeling romantic and starts feeling heavy. The episode carefully shows how fast things are happening without turning Cooper into a villain or a coward. He loves Ariana. That part is clear. But love doesn't erase fear, and it definitely doesn't erase doubt. Every conversation about the future feels bigger than the last. Where they'll live, how they'll raise a child, what kind of father he'll be. These aren't abstract ideas anymore. They are right in front of him. The moment Cooper is forced to spend real time with Ariana's baby is especially important. This isn't played for drama or shock. It's quiet, uncomfortable, and deeply revealing. Holding that child doesn't make Cooper panic immediately. Instead, it makes him think. And that thinking is what begins to break him down. He starts to realize that being a father isn't about intention, it's about consistency. It's about showing up every single day, even when you're tired, scared, or unsure. And Cooper knows deep down that he has never been consistent at anything in his life. Tommy tries, once again, to be the voice of reason. He doesn't attack Cooper. He doesn't forbid the marriage. He simply warns him. He reminds him that speed doesn't equal maturity, and that love doesn't automatically mean readiness. But just like with Cammy, Tommy's warnings land differently now. Cooper hears them, but he doesn't fully absorb them. He wants to believe he can rise to the occasion without fully understanding what that requires. And that gap between belief and reality is where the tension lives. What makes this storyline so effective is how patient it is. The show doesn't rush Cooper into a breakdown. Instead, it lets doubt slowly creep in. He starts questioning himself in quiet moments. He hesitates when he didn't before. He stares a little longer at the life he's stepping into. By the end of this section, Cooper hasn't collapsed, but the cracks are clearly forming. And those cracks matter because responsibility doesn't wait for confidence. It arrives whether you're ready or not. Episode 6 makes it clear that Cooper is standing at a crossroads. One path leads to growth, struggle, and earned maturity. The other leads to repeating the same mistakes, just with higher stakes. And the most unsettling part is that Cooper doesn't yet know which path he's on. He wants to be better. He wants to be reliable. But wanting something has never been enough in this world, and the episode quietly reminds us of that truth again and again. By the time the section ends, Cooper is no longer the reckless kid chasing excitement. He's a young man staring directly at responsibility and blinking. By the time episode 6 reaches its final stretch, it becomes painfully obvious that Tommy is no longer fighting circumstances. He is fighting isolation. The episode slowly strips him of every advantage he once had, not through loud confrontations, but through silence, exclusion, and carefully planted doubt. This is where Landman truly proves how sharp its writing can be, because Tommy's downfall doesn't come from a single mistake. It comes from being surrounded by people who no longer want to hear the truth. The rodeo event becomes the clearest symbol of this shift. What should have been a casual public appearance turns into an emotional nightmare for Tommy. Cammy and Galliano move as a unit, talking, laughing, making decisions together, while Tommy lingers on the edge, present but invisible. He isn't consulted, he isn't included, and worse than that, he isn't defended. Every look Cammy gives Galliano feels like confirmation that trust has already been transferred, and Tommy can feel it happening in real time. There is no argument to win here because the battle has already been decided without him. Galliano takes full advantage of this moment. He plays both sides with precision, telling Cammy just enough to make Tommy seem outdated, and telling Tommy just enough to make Cammy seem unreachable. He never lies outright. Instead, he twists perspective. He frames himself as the bridge between progress and survival, while Tommy is painted as the man clinging to the past. This is manipulation at its most effective because it doesn't feel aggressive. It feels reasonable. And that's exactly why it works. What makes Tommy's situation even more heartbreaking is that he sees it all coming. He understands the strategy. He recognizes the danger. But knowledge alone doesn't give him power anymore. Every warning he offers only pushes Cammy further away, reinforcing the idea that he doesn't trust her judgment. And for Cammy, who is desperate to prove she belongs in this role, that perception matters more than intention. She doesn't want to be protected, she wants to be respected. And Galliano knows exactly how to give her that illusion. By the end of the episode, Tommy is left with no clear move forward. If he stays quiet, he becomes irrelevant. If he speaks up, he becomes disposable. The company he helped build, protect, and stabilize is slowly slipping from his hands, not because he failed, but because the environment no longer values caution or loyalty. This is where episode 6 truly earns its title. It isn't just better than expected, it's devastating in its realism. The final moments leave us with an uncomfortable truth. Galliano hasn't won yet, but he doesn't need to. All he has to do is wait. The seeds of doubt have already been planted, and trust, once broken, doesn't return easily. Tommy stands alone, fully aware that the next move could cost him everything: his job, his reputation, and the only alliance that ever mattered to him. Episode 6 ends not with closure, but with inevitability. The pieces are in place. The sides are chosen, even if no one has said it out loud yet. And as the season moves forward, one thing is certain: the fallout from this episode will not be loud at first, but it will be brutal. By the time episode 6 reaches its final stretch, it becomes painfully obvious that Tommy is no longer fighting circumstances. He is fighting isolation. The episode slowly strips him of every advantage he once had, not through loud confrontations, but through silence, exclusion, and carefully planted doubt. This is where Landman truly proves how sharp its writing can be, because Tommy's downfall doesn't come from a single mistake. It comes from being surrounded by people who no longer